farming is basically the same as tech support. Why surveys suck. And Taylor Swift is not the only fearless one. We're going to talk about this and so much more today with Matt Beran. Matt, let's get into it.
Sounds good, Rocky. Thanks for having me on, Rocky. It's a good day to be alive, man.
Every day is a good day to be alive. Definitely when we get to sit across from each other and have a conversation about you, about our industry, about the things you're doing. And I'm so excited to have you on just for our audience. Before we dive into the background of Matt Beran, Matt, you're the first guy I ever sat across a computer from and got to record an episode of anything, podcast-wise, and Ticket Volume is that. So I will shamelessly plug Ticket Volume as you start this episode of Bytes and Banter. If you haven't checked out Ticket Volume, go check it out. Shameless plug. You don't have to do it. I'm going to do it for you.
Love it.
Tell our audience who the crap is Matt Beran. What is your background? You, at one point in your life, you were one of the big five consultant, and you know now you work for a smaller company doing this whole podcast and social media and OSC. And walk me through your background. Who are you?
Thank you, Rocky. Great introduction. A lot of that stuff is what I am. I'm a humble farm kid. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota. Literally, the town that I grew up next to was 50 people. I think it was 100 when I lived there. Now it's 50. And I graduated from a tiny little high school and quickly moved to the biggest city that I could handle, which is a tiny city in Minnesota, and went to college there. And I thought I was going for comp sci because I love technology, and so I thought I was going to become a programmer. But it turns out that you need to be really good at math to be a programmer, or at least to get a degree in comp sci. And I was terrible at math, so I quickly pivoted to an English degree because that's a language I do speak and read and write about a lot, and got a job in IT at the college in my freshman year. And so that was my work study program, was IT. I was making money towards my tuition and working in IT, and really cut my teeth there, learned to splice Cat5 cables. Yes, they used to be Cat5 cables. And, and fix computers, hauling around huge CRTs, fixing printers. That's really where I learned all the tricks of the service desk trade, was in college at that job while I was reading and writing as an English major. And then quickly got a job out of college as a customer service rep for a company that makes the software for Gray Clips. And so if you go into a Gray Clips and the stylist types in your phone number, I used to support that software for all the Gray Clips. And that really taught me the power of customer service and how to communicate well over the phone. And all the things that I didn't learn in IT at college, I kind of learned in that role, how corporations work, how the revenue is king, how we decide what to automate and what not to automate. And so that job really taught me a ton about enterprises. And I quickly automated myself out of as much of a job as I possibly could. And then I got bored. And so I moved to another company. I started looking for something that could challenge me again, something that I could learn and find a lot of automation potential. And I found my first enterprise service desk job at a medical device company. And I loved it so much and did the same thing, automated as much as I could, grew as much as I could. And they basically said, hey, Matt, we love you. We'd love to keep you. You can choose to go a leadership path or a technical path. And I wasn't interested in going technical because I was an English major and not very good at programming. And I wasn't really that interested in going the management path. I don't think that I really understood what management was or what leadership was. I think I would have made an incredible leader, and I wish that I had kind of tried that. But instead, I took the third route, which is to go consulting. And that's really where I cut my teeth. Like you said, Rocky, I was a consultant at several small consulting firms, boutique consulting firms, fantastic organizations to work with. And A couple of them got purchased by some of the big five vendors who I won't name. But I didn't like those large organizations as much because I just couldn't change them. You know, the opportunity to automate stuff and change the way we're working wasn't really there. And so eventually I found myself back in small companies all the time because I knew that I could change it and grow it. And I did ServiceNow implementations for 11 years or just over 10 years. And what I learned was that we kept solving service management issues the exact same way at different clients. And it got to the point where I didn't like the idea that we were rebuilding incident management again at another client, basically doing the same thing that we had done at the last ServiceNow client. So I went looking for a technology vendor that kind of felt like ServiceNow did in the heyday back in 2007, 2008. And I found Invigate, a company that's interested in making software to make IT stuff easier to do. And so it feels a lot like ServiceNow because they're really focused on solving IT problems, and we're seeing a lot of growth in the space because of that. Because we're not a platform, we really are software.
I love that. Not trying to be something you're not. Now, you've had a lot of ebbs and flows in your journey, right? A lot of different directions, a lot of pivots, a lot of what Roy Atkins, another, a shameless plug at Know Your Dew Point, right? Dew Point, that play on words. A lot of dew points, as he would say. Check out his podcast as well. We're going to have Roy on at some point. We got to talk to him about that. But I'm curious to hear you in your journey talk about maybe that catalyst moment that where you felt that friction that you're talking about, like, man, and maybe this is something I shouldn't say super publicly, but we all know ServiceNow, it's more of a marketing company than it is an IT tool. And that's okay. There's a reason they have so much market cap, right? They're big. They have a lot of functionality. Everybody wants to be a part of what they're doing in terms of all the plugins. That's fine. But what was that catalyst moment for you where you said, man, I need to find something different? Like, walk me through that.
Yeah. Great question. Great next topic, because it was difficult. I was making so much money in that ecosystem that it was really, they call them the golden handcuffs. You're getting paid a lot. So why would you leave? Why would you change? And for me, money, thankfully, this is entitlement speaking, but money isn't the reason I work. I love I love money. Don't get me wrong. If someone wants to send some, I'll give you my address. But really, I find great pleasure in helping people fix problems. I think like that is the very core. It started in farming. My dad would come to me and he would say, "This thing's broken. We're going to work on it today." And I would go out with him and we would sit there shoulder to shoulder, looking at the problem and sometimes cussing at the problem. And sometimes, he would have something he would propose. He would say, let's try doing this. Let's try fixing it this way. And I would come back and I would say, well, would that work? Would that not work? And that collaboration, that back and forth, that helping fix things and overcoming those challenges together, it's the reward that you're not paid for, but it's a reward that we feel often in IT. And this is really what a service desk agent is doing. They're joining the customer shoulder to shoulder again and staring at the ERP system or staring at the supply chain system or whatever they're staring at. You're staring at it together. You're cussing it out together. You're solving it together. And hopefully everything gets fixed in the end. And so I think like when I think about why I've done it or why I left, it was because I wasn't solving the same problem. I wasn't solving unique, challenging problems. I was basically guiding customers through, what fields do you want on your incident form? What categories do you want on your incident form? Instead of asking, should we have categories on our incident form? Should we have these things? And that philosophical approach to how we work and collaborate is something that's my passion. That is what drives me. It's what keeps me in this industry, besides helping people.
The comparisons to a farm and what we do in technology and technology support, I've never really thought about it before, but man, there's so many illustrations waiting to be had there, right? From the advancement in technology and how much you can farm comparatively to 40 years ago, right? You
Exactly.
know, how many people you need to do that work and how you fix the machines. And no, I think that's small town boy going to a big town company and then now back to a small town company, if you will. I think it's just so cool to hear you talk about specifically that moment of, man, I want to fix and help people solve meaningful problems. Because if you're listening to this and you're somebody who's an ITSM consultant and you are spending your time all day, every day asking, should we put category here, a subcategory? Do we need to go another layer? Like and you love it. No shade.
No shame.
But for you, Matt, right? You want to understand deeper, right? Now, you hear this term curiosity a lot, right? Definitely, if you're following if you're following thought leaders, I mean, they talk a lot about curiosity. Anybody who's kind of worth following at least talks about it somewhat. And I'd be curious to know, what does that look like in our world, right? Is somebody who's an IT leader who's maybe wants to push the status quo, right? And wants to challenge the way things are and wants to automate the right things and not automate for automate's sake, right? And not go to a vendor that is going to overpromise and underdeliver and forget to tell you ... Oh, by the way, the fine print says that results may vary and most likely you're not going to achieve what we just showed you in the demo, right? Like, what are those meaningful questions, Matt, that we can be asking as technology leaders?
Oh man, the meaningful questions that we can ask as technology leaders, because the heart of your question is, I think, how do we move on? How do we get out of the monotony of service management and into
Yes.
so
Yep.
for me it's about experimentation. It's all about controlled experiments. And that can be as simple as changing the way that your agents answer the phone. It can be as simple as switching your app to dark mode over light mode. The devil is in the details, and you've heard that phrase a billion times. But the same goes for IT and for experiences and systems and services. All of it matters. All the facets of that intricate diamond that you've been cutting over the last 30 years as an organization, all the facets of it matter to your people. And I put this in a presentation I'm writing right now. I put it right at the beginning. Tech support is an emotional journey where sometimes the technology gets fixed. And all the time, I believe, the emotions should be addressed. And I think what keeps me curious about service management is it's that threshold. How do we how do we create humanity in a technical process, in a technical interaction? And the AI companies are really trying hard to do this. They're really, really trying hard to do this. How do we make AI feel like a human? And the standards are trying to kind of fight against that. If you're paying attention to what IEEE is writing around the AI space right now, one of the things that they're writing is about simulating human empathy and the constraints that we should be placing on the technology that emulates empathy and emulates emotions. And so I think one of the things that just keeps, like, of course we need to experiment with this. Of course we need to, because the chatbots from 2008 and 2010, they weren't even trying to simulate empathy. They weren't even trying to do anything. They were just trying to give you a response that at least sounded like a sentence.
Only
So
if you
now it's
told
like,
them what response that was, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so now I think what I see is all this opportunity for our industry to grasp what is human, to question the past of IT, the last 30, 40, 50 years. Is what we're doing correct? Is it healthy? Is it right? And then thirdly, just look at all this technology, because you can there's two types of people that are early adopters. They hear the fads, they hear the news, they hear AI, and they repeat it to people. They talk it out with people. They philosophize about it. They retweet it. They share it on LinkedIn. And then there's a second set of people that hear AI and they talk about it with people. They post about it, and then they download it and they start using it. And I think that's really where my sweet spot sits in this industry, is that I hack everything. I try to do everything. If you've heard of an ITSM system and they have a trial demo out there, I've used it. I guarantee I have used it. If you hear a new, what was the one today? SoundStarter. It's just a simple app that runs on your computer. You do a quick key combo and it changes your audio outputs. Every time that I hear or see something that I think might be relevant to our industry, I take it, I put it in the experimentation book, I test it out, and I report the results to people and say, hey, think about this when you're doing service design or service transition. What is that like? How can you improve? How could you add this to your process? How might we use this to provide a better experience?
I love that. I love that, just testing and tinkering. And I think it's a good way to put it. I heard this analogy, and you might have heard it. I don't know where I heard it, but it's similar to when you look at a Fitbit, right? A Fitbit is a great piece of technology. It's going to track a lot of things for you. It's going to do a lot of things for you. It's never going to make you get up off the couch and go downstairs and lift some weights. It's never going to make you walk more. It's never going to make you put down your delicious Snickers bar and go open a can of or a container of blueberries, right? It's using that experimentation, I think, is something that we could all learn from and do, and definitely in our organizations, right? And we have the likes of you and other people who are testing it out, and so we don't have to be the first to fail, right? That is something I think a lot of people should learn. It's smart to pause, right? Pause and watch. And I think there's this fear in our industry, not amongst service desk folks or everybody, but there's this fear of not being up to speed with the latest. When in reality, how many organizations really need the latest, and how many outcomes and experiences are really going to be significantly impacted by the quote unquote latest? I don't know. But I think it's a question we don't ask. We don't see leaders asking that question.
Yes. I think what your comment reminds me is that value of the technological value, the value of technology can only be realized through people.
Yeah.
If technology is serving technology, there is no value. Maybe there is for someone else down the line, but that value can only be perceived by people. And yeah, you're right. We need to be comfortable in those problems. Living in a problem is the best way to solve it. And we as engineers and as fixers and helpers, we are often too ambitious, often too anxious to provide that solution, to jump to conclusions as opposed to just being curious in the problem.
Ask more questions before you make more decisions. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Exactly.
Move too fast, win stupid prizes, because that's a stupid game. So we're talking about change, right, Matt? And I'm going to read a quote of yours that recently you said to Roy on his podcast. And I want you to listen to these words, and I want you to flesh this out, because I think you didn't dive too far down the rabbit hole of this, but there's so much value in this specific piece of what you said around breaking down silos in our organization. You said if you don't already have your colleagues, coworkers, and your teams on your team making the decisions around that rollout, making the decisions around that technology, you are robbing them the privilege of being involved in their own future. Walk me through that. Flesh that out for me, because I think that when I heard that and I listened to that full episode, I didn't realize Roy had a podcast. Just I'm going to openly admit that until I saw you share that. I was like, oh, I'm going to go check this out. And you said that, and I wrote it down. I'm like, I'm going to talk to Matt about that because he needs to flesh that out more because that's so good, so good.
Thank you. That's very complimentary. I like that that struck a chord with you. Just hearing you repeat it gave me goosebumps. Actually, because I didn't really ever think about that. I didn't hear it when I was saying it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To hear it repeated back to you is very interesting. I do a presentation on careers and service and support. I do a presentation on like finding your next career, how to get there. And I don't have the slide handy, but there's only 3 or 4 reasons that people go to work. There's only 3 or 4 reasons why people are incented to go to work. And one of them is autonomy. If people feel like they control their future, they have way more interest in investing in it. Not that complicated. But a project that is focused on improving your productivity is just such a great example of an obvious situation where someone would freely give their time, possibly even their unpaid time. And I don't think that organizations realize that if employees could improve their work life, they likely will. And I think that is an opportunity that so many teams and so many departments and so many organizations are just sitting on. They're just not even paying attention. And you see it too in my other hated thing that we do. And you know what it is. It's surveys, baby. I freaking hate surveys because we send them. We send them all the time. After every incident, after every request, and annually, biannually, whatever, every quarter, every month, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. You got to listen to your people. You got to get information. You got to get feedback. But you get that survey result back. How much work are you stacking up for yourself in those survey results? You know, it could be 5 years worth of work. Well, don't send another survey for 5 years. And so, anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but don't send surveys.
Yeah, no, all of that back to don't send surveys. No, I think, it's been a fun few weeks for me joining a new organization, and I went from a very large organization to a very small, intimate organization. And this is and I'm curious how you flesh this out a little bit because there's an opportunity to influence how we get intentional, meaningful feedback from our employees, right? And our employees serve customers, and it's a unique setup. It's not like it's a nonprofit type business, but they're serving our employees who are serving our customers, and those customers are ultimately driving revenue, even though it's nonprofit and we're investments and blah, 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 right? But all this being said, there's kind of a clean slate, and I'm curious to hear you flesh out a little bit. If you had to start from scratch, you had nothing in place. You had an ITSM, pretty basic, pretty simple, right? You put your tickets in. There's a service catalog that people can use. There's some knowledge in place. Basic things are in place, right? Change management's in place. It's really good, blah, 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 blah. What would you do to start getting really meaningful, actionable insight from your stakeholders in the business? And let's say you can reach out to all of them if you wanted to, hypothetically, in a day.
That would be a luxury. Man, that would be a luxury. Imagine being able to literally talk to every employee and get their feedback. The beauty of user research is that it is an art form. It is something that takes years of practice to be good at it. But amateurs try it all the time, and it can work too. You can totally find great value in there as an amateur. And I would call myself an amateur actually at user research. But the goal of user research, because you go to the company picnic and you ask Alice over in customer service, Alice, what do you think of IT? And my gosh, Matt, IT is just great. You guys are the best. I'm gonna bring you brownies next week. Thanks for fixing our stuff. Great, thanks, Alice. Then later she goes home and complains to her husband about the technology that she has, or the time she had to wait on hold, or all the other things, because she's not going to tell you to your face that you're ugly, or that your baby's ugly, or whatever. She's not going to deliver bad news to you directly. And so user research, I highly recommend using third parties for it. Just getting a random person to ask the questions makes it a lot better, and promise anonymity, because then people will be even more honest, especially if that third party, specifically spells out your name, your position, and your exact words will not be shared with your employer. That phrase alone will get some truth out of people. And then the goal isn't to ask the question. You don't want to ask, how is IT doing? Because if you ask that, yeah, it's way too general, first of all. Like, even if you ask something like that's terrible because it's general. But even if you ask something specific, like, do you like your mouse? If you ask that question, you will get a biased answer, because we have bias all over the place. Alice from customer service, she's a gamer. She likes to have high resolution mice. It should be doing like 3000 DPI so that I can game really fast, and when I get to work I want it to match. But you guys are giving me a trackball for some reason. Why is that corporate standard? Trackballs. Do you remember those?
Oh, I do. I'm not that young.
And so then the goal is really to not ask that question, to instead ask around the question. You're saying, how comfortable is it for you to use your devices at work? Do you ever experience hand pain, eye strain, back pain? And even those are leading. Even the way this is a great example of how user research is so key. Those were actually leading questions, because I was saying, are you comfortable? Do you experience eye pain, hand pain, back pain? And that is all leading. Instead, what I should be asking is tell me about a time when you experienced physical pain while you were at work. And that sort of open-ended question gives them the opportunity to tell a story, to give you their biased story, but then for you to distill that down into an opinion, into an actual opinion. And it's not the words that matter as much as what is the situation? How, and can you describe it accurately to the next person? Because that's really what happens. The customer is having carpal tunnel problems. The user researcher finds out about it, and then they need to tell someone that person is having carpal tunnel issues, and do it in a way so that person, the person they were listening to originally, feels heard. Feels like the organization heard that they were having problems at work, and then took the time, effort, resources to make them comfortable, to provide them with a comfortable life. And I think that's the beauty of user research, is that you hear the pains, and then hopefully, if you continue doing user research, you start to hear the positive things, like, oh, you guys replaced these trackballs. We're not doing that anymore. Thank you for doing that. I'm so glad I was involved in that user research. And that's how you provide continuity in that space. You do the initial research, you're asking these people questions, you put in some changes, you ask them again, and then hopefully things have improved. And then user research actually gets harder, because then you've got additional bias. So what a great field, though.
Yeah, I think, as I think about just hearing you talk about user research and diving into that, there's some components, right? Number one, you have to know your user journey, right? You have to understand where those meaningful moments are, where those moments of friction could happen, where you might not understand that's a meaningful moment, right? That leaves an impression on the experience that your end user or your customer, whoever it is, right, is having. And there could be something that's wrong with that. And then asking those open-ended questions that maybe don't lead them. If you have an indication like, I think our self-service portal is kind of garbage because we didn't talk to Matt and we have all these categories and subcategories and people have to know what to put and they don't know. And we always route it to the service desk anyway. So why did it fill anything out? And we think that's a problem, but you don't, if you directly ask that question, do you like filling out 6 boxes for the services to call you no matter what happens? The answer is going to be no, right?
Of course not.
But I think the real art, and I'd be curious, we'll have to talk to some people, some resources. I'd be curious to know how you tie those meaningful questions to that persona, whatever you want to call it, that user, that whoever. How do you tie that question to their ability to drive meaningful outcomes in whatever the role is, right? Like, how do you tie those two together? Because I think they matter, right? And part of it could be just happiness, right? Employee happiness, employee experience does impact customer experience. Surprise, if you haven't heard it before, breaking news, right?
It's cognitive load,
Yeah.
Even just having to reset a password for an employee with ADHD, that could be many hours of productivity lost. And to deny that your teams are neurodiverse is to ignore that they're human. Yeah. And so that would be silly. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And instead, I think we're so used to measuring and proving things and using data to drive decisions. And I am totally on board with that. I love data-driven decisions. And in reality, there are times where you just have to do the right thing. And I think great leaders know the difference. And they know when they need more data and when it's just the right thing to do. You see this in marketing all the time, because in marketing, it's all about tracking. How do I track this person? How many times did this person hear our messaging? How many times did they click on our webpage? How many emails did they open? They are literally tracking every little detail. But in reality, Rocky just recommended a product to me. And is that tracked? No. Is the conversation that we have on Reddit tracked? Maybe, but probably not. And so I think even though we want to make data-driven decisions, I think it's foolish to only make data-driven decisions. Search for the data for sure. And in the case of, the trackball, measure that person. Do a field study. Literally do a usability study on their human interface device and see what happens. You observe them using the trackball. They wrote an email in Outlook and did something in the ERP system. Great. Now give them a regular mouse and have them do the exact same thing with a stopwatch and just click it. Yeah. Where's it at? And that usability testing is something that we don't do enough in service design, nor do we do enough of it in continual service improvement.
I think at the OSC community last Friday, I said that right? OSC? Not OCS?
Yep, OSC, Open Service Community.
Okay, making sure I'm not crazy. It was the first one I got to join, and it was interesting because it was Happy Signals. And it's one of the few products that are looking at the human side of the IT experience, right? You got all these deck tools, and they're great. They're useful. They have their value. Hey, I can put mine on too if you want. It's sitting down there on my shelf, right? I want to see if you can see it. I got to spin my chair over there.
If you're just listening, we've got Happy Signals hats.
And those are all valuable. But man, to be able to ask the human throughout their experience with the different parts of technology and the different processes for their sentiment and for their emotion, that can give you, call it data, call it whatever you want. It can give you the human perspective, and the human perspective matters. It
Totally.
matters. It's like looking at a PTO calendar and saying, I've got a team of 10 and we don't know what volume's going to be like for 3 months. In the next 3 months, we might have some changes. I can't approve your wedding off yet. What? It's a
Yeah.
data-driven decision, but it is it, right? you know?
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. No, so I love that perspective. Uh, Walk me through, what you have going on. Obviously, OSC. You got ticket volume. Like, what are the things that are really you're passionate about right now? ESM. I know you. I would love for you to touch a little bit on that. What are the things
Yeah.
that Matt has going on that our industry you're just excited to share over the next year or so?
Oh my gosh. Well, I can't give away spoilers. I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but I've got a whiteboard over here with my presentations that I'm writing for this year. And that's kind of how I work. I work in cycles. So in summer, I'm doing a lot of research. I'm developing content. I'm listening to customers. I'm sitting in on implementation calls. I'm talking to my colleagues in the industry and just seeing what's going on. And then I get to develop content around it, and then I get to go on a speaking circuit for the spring and fall. I'm very lucky to get to do what I'm doing. I really love it because I get to talk to people and learn stuff every day. I think the things that are really driving my passion right now are some of the AI edge cases. I know a lot of people roll their eyes when they hear AI because we've read the headlines and vendors really want to talk about it. But I'm the vendor who doesn't want to talk about it and doesn't believe anything that we say or any of our competitors say until I see it.
Yep.
I need to see it. It has to be in my hands for me to trust that this exists and has value. And I will tell you that some of the things that we are developing in that space are just amazing. And here's what I didn't realize. And I'm giving an AI presentation tomorrow, and so this is top of mind, of course. And what I didn't realize is that so many people were afraid that AI was going to take service agents' jobs, and that we kind of didn't really realize what the value would be for service agents. And so now we're starting to really realize that because we're actually making headways in that. So AI comes out, we do the obvious things, obvious features, things like helping people write, assessing imagery in a ticket and providing that, reviewing text in a ticket and then providing summaries. Like, of course, these are the easy things that we can do within a public LLM. But now we're getting into way more interesting stuff. So, for instance, and here's how I kind of think of it now. AI is kind of like having an agent for your agents. It's like having a second agent that can do a lot of things while your agent isn't doing those things. So specifically, how many times does a customer want to know, when is this going to be taken care of? Every single customer wants to know when it's going to be taken care of. They want to know when the incident's going to be closed. They want to know when the request is going to be completed. They want to know when the change is done. And having this AI agent sit alongside, parallel to your service desk agents, calculating when something can be actually delivered and done is a level of data that we have never reached in service management. We give SLAs. We quote the worst possible scenario. Oh, that'll be done in a week. Oh, great. Yeah, that little thing should be done in a few hours. But because of our capacity, because of our complexity, I can't promise it until a week. Well, with AI, we're going to be able to take into account how much is coming in, how much total work do you have, how long will that work actually take you, how often are you working, and then be able to calculate when it thinks you will have it done. And so this estimation process, no agent would ever take the time to calculate all of that. Oh, please hold while I do that. I'm just going to jot down some numbers here quick and do. No, you would never take the time to do it because it would take longer to give an estimate than it would be to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's really got me excited is that we're starting to see hope that AI is going to help us in a lot of ways. Definitely not going to replace agents anytime soon because it just is terrible at that. Failing, I read an article today that it fails 70% of all tasks that it gives to you, that you give to it. And so for me, that's really the most exciting. And then I would say when it comes to enterprise service management and hearing what the other departments are doing when it comes to service management, or the other functions are doing, I'm starting to really explore that. And I'm diving in deep into some communities, some HR communities, to hear what their concerns are and to try to find, are they thinking about service management? How are they thinking about service management? Does SHRM actually cover this kind of thing, which is their kind of standard best practice model? And so I think that would be my call to action, is if you've been expecting the other functions to cross over the silo boundary into IT and ask for your advice, probably not going to happen. And if it's not happening, go to them. Go seek out your peers, listen to them, understand their lives. And if it's not your peers, go outside. Try to find these communities online so that you can not only can you learn from them and steal great ideas from them, but you will also be able to help them. And I think if we can sit in the problem long enough and not come off as ITIL zealots or service management zealots, I think people will be more receptive to what we have learned over the last 30 to 50 years, and it won't get lost in the AI babble.
And I think it's all about leading with a human first approach, a human service mindset, right? How can I serve you as a human? You just happen to be in HR. Well, guess what? We support HR. We've been supporting HR for a long time, right? And I just had a conversation with one of my colleagues today about some different parts of our business and like some OCM stuff, and like, hey, how can we remove the friction? Like, we can invite them to the table and say, here's what we're thinking about change and how we can communicate and get you guys your questions answered proactively. And like, what do you think? Right? What do you think? Because guess what? If they have some buy-in, you're leading with a human first approach, to your point, it's not going to matter what department they're in, right? They're going to feel like they're, back to your quote, Matt, that gave you the goosebumps. They're going to feel like they're part of their own future, developing their own future. I love it. I love it. Cool. Before I ask you our send-off question, Matt, where can people find you? Where can they check you out? Any recommendations for them to go follow, etc.?
Well, I think if you haven't seen my content on LinkedIn yet, you might not be on LinkedIn. So you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can also find Ticket Volume at ticketvolume.com. It forwards to another address, but it's the easy one to remember. And then I actually post all of my content, most of my presentations and videos that I put out around just learning, things where I'm trying to share what I've learned in a succinct way. You can find all that on mattberan.com as well.
Awesome. Well, Matt, let's say you're going to hit rewind on life. Okay. This 6'7" Matt Beran is not 38 anymore. You're going to rewind. Maybe it's on the farm. Maybe it's, as an English major. You pick the time in your life. What words of wisdom or advice would you give younger Matt?
I would tell myself to be more fearless. I did act without fear, and that's entitlement speaking as well. So by all means, know that I recognize that entitlement, and I operated without fear, and I could have taken it further. I could have achieved more if I had started earlier, if I had focused earlier. And so I think that's the other bit of advice. So be more fearless, but also start. You have to start. And I learned this in podcasting. This is my 4th podcast. And what you're building isn't just this engine that builds a machine every day, or builds an episode every week or month or quarter or year, whatever, however often you publish. You're building a backlog of content that is invaluable. As that content sits out there, it will continue to, it'll continue to be fed to models and LLMs, but also you will continue to see people that reach into that back catalog. You will find yourself reaching into that back catalog, looking for the wisdom that you've heard on your podcast. And I would say the same thing for businesses, any business or any initiative that you're doing. if you want to be a musician, start now, because the musicians of 10 years from now are already making the mistakes. They're already ahead of you making mistakes, and those mistakes are how you get to success. Those mistakes build the mountain up towards success or failure. I say there is a valley of failure that you can reach as well, but it really, if you give up, that's the only difference. If you make mistakes and give up, you have reached the valley of failure. And if you make mistakes and you go on and you learn from them and you innovate and change and grow further, eventually you will reach success.
I love that. I just posted a question today on LinkedIn that makes me think of that. It's, what would you do differently if you knew you would not fail?
Yeah.
Do it. Get rid of the fear. Do it. Matt, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. For our listeners, follow Matt. If you're not, you probably already are. But if you're not, follow him. Check out Ticket Volume and mattberan.com for all his presentations, his content. Matt, we'll definitely have you on again. Thank you again for your time. We will catch you on the next episode of Bytes and Banter.